Hi, how are you? Before we start, this is a warning. This podcast contains 3 things that every listener needs to know about. It contains strong language, adult themes, and a thick Scottish accent. It might not be suitable for everyone. Do not stay here. Stay anywhere else you can, but avoid this shithole. It's noisy, it's dirty, it's creepy, and they only have waffles for breakfast. The rooms feel strange. Yeah, that's right, they feel strange. There was a peephole in the shower room. A fucking peephole. What's that about? If I could give this 0 stars, I would. Avoid it. Avoid it at all costs. I've warned you. Welcome to the Extraordinary Stories podcast. Hi, how are you? Are you well? Are you good? I am. So here we are, another new Extraordinary Stories podcast episode. Thanks to everyone who has so far joined the Facebook group. It's been lovely to have lots of people joining. Now I've changed my Facebook personal profile over to Baz Henderson. So if you want to search and find me, you can. So big thanks to those who, when I asked in the last episode for people to offer me feedback, so many people were willing to do that, and I thank you all the people who emailed me and were willing to reply to my questions. You came back with such amazing stuff. So this episode, I've chosen for this episode not one person, not one story, but instead one place, one building. And the building is the Cecil Hotel in downtown LA. Some of you will know the Cecil Hotel straight away because of the many true crime stories and the many weird things that have happened in this hotel. So the intro text that I was reading there was actually a TripAdvisor review from a guy who stayed there only last year. He was quite upset about the fact that there was only waffles for breakfast. But I think what he was more upset about was the peephole in the shower and the fact that it was a creepy place to stay. So before I really delve into this, mid-research, I thought I was discovering something brand new here with the Cecil Hotel. And then I discovered that the programme American Horror Story, which I've never watched, I've never seen this programme, but they apparently had a series that was called Hotel, and it was loosely based on a lot of the stuff that had gone on in this hotel. So I think everything in their programme was kind of fictionalised around stuff that they had seen. Anyway, the stories I'm going to tell you are the very real stories of what happened in the Cecil Hotel, and they are very weird. They're very, very strange indeed. So many interesting and unbelievable people stayed here in their time, and I'm going to tell you about a few of them. Okay, let's go. So let's introduce the main character itself, the hotel. So, a tour guide who was touring people around in 2017 in LA said of this hotel, this was just a place where people who were really down on their luck were going to stay. This hotel is filled with people who are at the edge of being integrated into society. So where is it and what is it? So it's now called the Stay on Main, but it was formerly the Cecil Hotel. And it's a budget hotel in downtown LA. It's on Main Street. It has 600 guest rooms. The Cecil, this is just a little bit of the history. The Cecil was constructed in 1924 by William Banks Hanner. And he originally, I think he designed it as a place that would be a destination for travellers and tourists. That was his kind of main idea for building it. It's built in the Art Deco style. Apparently it cost £1 million to complete at the time, which would have been a lot of money, I think, to spend on a hotel in 1924. So they had sort of a huge big entranceway that was all marble. They had stained glass windows. They had lots of lovely big statues in the lobby and outside. So probably looking quite grand in 1924 is what I would imagine. So the guy, Mr. Hanner, he invested in it thinking that there had been a lot of hotels around that area who'd opened at the same time, and they all seemed to be doing quite well. So he thought, oh well, you know what, throw a hotel in the mix, and I'm pretty sure it's going to do well. It's going to be good. But just around the corner was the Great Depression in America, and people were not coming to these hotels anymore. People had no money to be coming to these hotels, and a lot of the areas around the hotel began to really fall into disrepair. They became very poverty-ridden areas, so there wasn't a lot of money around it, and his hotel would unfortunately fall under the area that's known as Skid Row. Now, I'm pretty sure most people will have, well, all Americans will have, but I don't know that everyone will have. But Skid Row was a place where there was a lot of poverty, there was a lot of drugs, wasn't a good area. And it was just the financial climate at the time. It was just that people had lost lots of money. There was no money going around. So unfortunately, this hotel that he had invested in and put all of his money into was right in the middle of an area that was not a good area to be around at the time. So there were as many as, this is horrible, 10,000 homeless people living within a 4-mile radius of the hotel. And so by the 1950s, the hotel had become a place where transients and homeless people who had any kind of money, they could go and stay in the Cecil Hotel, because of the financial climate, the Cecil Hotel had to lower its prices, and so it was renting out rooms at a couple of dollars a night just to try and make any kind of money that it could. It was renting it out to sort of everybody and anybody, be you homeless, be you drug dealer, be you, I don't know, whoever. If you had a couple of dollars, you could come and stay in the Cecil Hotel. So over the years, it tried to rebuild itself, and in 2011, the Cecil Hotel, I keep calling it Cecil. In 2011, the Cecil Hotel was rebranded as Stay on the Main. So that was its new name. It was no longer the Cecil Hotel, and you'll kind of understand when I go through these stories why they would have wanted to change the name. So, why have I picked this as a story? Why have I picked this building? Well, I'll tell you, it's because of its very creepy, mysterious, and now really famed goings on. There's been so many suicides, murders, unexplained events and mysteries surrounding this place ever since the day it opened. I've picked 5 residents who in their life stayed at the hotel And I'm going to tell you their extraordinary and bizarre goings on and their relationship with the Cecil Hotel. Let's kick off with number one. Number one is Goldie Osgood. So, Goldie Osgood was a widow and a long-term resident of the Cecil Hotel. So, Goldie had like a really good rate going on with the hotel because she was a long-term guest. Now, I'm not 100% sure what the circumstances were for her to be there, but I'm pretty much going to imagine she was either in a place where she couldn't afford a house, or if she could afford a house, she just couldn't be bothered with all the shit that comes from owning a house, so instead had chosen to live in the Cecil Hotel. So she'd worked for years and years and years as a telephone operator for various companies, but she was now retired. So Goldie had a few hobbies, but amongst them, she had one hobby that was her absolute favourite, and that was feeding pigeons. So, I mean, great. Whatever makes you happy, that's fine. If your thing is feeding pigeons, go for it. Do it. If that's your thing. You know what I mean? Everyone's got to have a hobby. Everyone's got to have something that they love in life. And I would honestly love to think I was the kind of human being, I would never judge anybody for what their hobby is. But Goldie, she was obsessed with feeding the pigeons. That was her thing. She really loved it. So, she was well known in the area because she always fed the pigeons, and there was a little square just round from the Cecil Hotel. It's called Pershing Square, and people would see her there every day feeding the pigeons, so she became known as the Pigeon Woman. Good nickname there. Good nickname, the Pigeon Woman. So she was there all the time. So, like any normal Thursday in 1964, it was the 4th of June, Goldie got up in the hotel. She had a breakfast. She went to the nearby shops. She purchased a new boot. She bought some fruit. And of course, she bought some bread and some seed to feed the pigeons. So it's lunchtime and the square is busy. People are passing through. Folk are on their lunch break. People are, just walking through the square, just going about their lives. And there's loads and loads of people that remember seeing Goldie there feeding the pigeons. She was wearing at the time a long beige coloured jacket. So, around 5 p.m. on that same day, still the Thursday, a maid in the hotel, she is going around each of the rooms and she's delivering the newly published phone book. Remember the days when a phone book was actually a thing? So she's going around each of the rooms, she's delivering the new phone books to each one, and she gets to Goldie's hotel room door. So she knocks on the door and she gets no reply. So she knocks again. Once more, no reply. So, using the master key that she has, she thinks Goldie's obviously not in the room. She lets herself in, and inside the room, she's in for a major shock. Goldie was lying dead on the hotel bed, having been stabbed and strangled. Later, it would be discovered that she had been sexually assaulted. Oof, God. Horrible. So, 2 days after Goldie's body had been discovered, police have no leads in this case. They do not understand, unless this was a really random killing, unless this was just someone broke in and they just wanted to rape, stab and strangle someone. No one was actually out to get Goldie. So This makes it difficult for police because then they're having to try and hunt down someone who's really just a random. They're not looking for someone who's connected to her, which makes their job way more difficult. So a few days later, in the newspaper, they were leading with the headline that this woman had been killed, and they start to print the picture of Goldie, and then a few more people start to come forward and say, yeah, I was there on that day and I remember seeing her in her long beige coat and she was feeding the pigeons. So lots of people can go, yeah, I remember that Thursday. I remember the square and I remember her feeding the pigeons. Now the following day the police receive a call which at first they think is completely unrelated to the case. This just comes in as a call, something they have to deal with. They at first don't see the connection. A female calls police to say that during her lunchtime, she was at the square and she was eating her lunch and there was a man wandering around and he was wearing a long beige jacket, but it was covered in blood. It was covered in blood stains. And so, not quite knowing what that was about, she thought, well, I better phone police and just report it. Which is the right thing to do. Good on her. So she reports this to police. Police arrive at the square. They find the man. He's wandering about in his beige coat, covered in bloodstains. And so, not knowing really what they're dealing with, they take him in for questioning. The man is 29-year-old Jacques B. Hellinger. I don't know if I've said that correctly, but that's I'm going to go with Jacques B. Hellinger. I think I'm in the right area. So, the beige jacket that he's wearing, it's covered in bloodstains. It turns out this was Goldie's jacket. So how did he have it? Police ask, why are you wearing the jacket of the woman who died in the hotel just not far from here? And he says he found it in the bins near the hotel, and not having much money, he'd taken it because it was getting cold, and actually he wasn't that worried about the fact that there were blood stains on it. Now that's suspicious. I don't know if I'm buying that story. I don't know if Jacques B. Eleanor was telling the truth there at all. So police, with very little else to go on, they arrest him for the murder, but the case went no further. It never went to court. It never really went any further than Jacques' arrest because they had no more evidence than the jacket and they couldn't prove that he hadn't just taken it out of a bin. No one was ever prosecuted for the death of Goldie Osgood. It's such a shame, it's such a terrible shame that she was killed in a really brutal way and no one was ever brought to justice for it. So the day after her death, and I think this is really nice, Goldie's friends and people who had come to know her as Pigeon Lady, they gathered together in Pershing Square, where she liked to feed the pigeons, to express their grief together. 200 people turned up to remember her, and as a part of the act of remembering her, they fed the pigeons in the square. I think that's beautiful. I think that's so nice. I do. I think that's fucking lovely. Oh. So, Jean Rosenstein, who was a retired nurse, and she was a friend of Goldie, she said, we were all her friends in a way. Even if you didn't know her, you were still kind of somehow her friend. So, someone suggested to Jean that she get some flowers, and they ended up with hundreds of bouquets of flowers in Pershing Square, where Goldie used to go every day. And her friend said, "We just want her to know that she will always be remembered." So that's Goldie's story. There's something about that I think is just really touching. I find it really moving. And I think I found it moving, and then I kind of went into my own thing about it. Makes me think of the fact that every town, every city, and every village, there is a figure who you don't always know. You don't always know these people, but they sort of somehow become a little bit of your life because you're seeing them regularly, or you're seeing them all the time. I'm sure everybody has somebody in their community, in their world, who is that person. There's a guy called Leo, the Silent Raver. Now, Leo's a Glaswegian man. He cuts about Glasgow, and if you look on Facebook for Leo, the Silent Raver, you'll find this guy. He's basically in about his 40s. He walks about in he sort of wears like a tracksuit. He's always got headphones on. Now, Leo gets this does my head in, because a lot of people take the piss out of him, and it's not fair. It's not right to take the piss of him, but simultaneously, a lot of people don't take the piss out of him, and they actually celebrate him. But basically what he does is he just rave dances. He just like puts a wee set of headphones in, and he just goes for it. But he does this publicly, so he'll do it in like the middle of the busiest street of Glasgow, and he just gets his headphone and he fucking goes for it. He's whipping out all the moves, and people love to film him, put it on YouTube, and he's a real kind of like, he's known round Glasgow as like oh fuck, there's fucking Leo the Raver, let's go and have a chat. He's the loveliest guy in the world. I've had a couple of interactions with him, and he's just the nicest of guys. But I don't know, I think it's one or two things with him. Either there's a mental health issue going on that no one is dealing with, or he's actually just taken so many drugs in his life that his brain is completely riddled with drugs. I don't really know, but he seems to be doing fine. He seems to be coping in life. He's got quite the following. In fact, I think he's got his own Facebook group and all that. I think Facebook page. I think he's doing okay, Leo. So yeah, I just think if we can celebrate people like that, let's celebrate them. Okay, so that was the death of Goldie in the Cecil. Let's discuss resident of the Cecil Hotel number 2. This one is big. Jack Utenwenger. In July 1991, in Los Angeles, two fathers are out for a trip with their kids. They're on a drive and they're heading for the beach. They turn off the main road, they head for a shortcut they found, and they discover an absolutely terrible sight on the road. The body of a woman was lying face up in the road, partially hidden under some shrubs. Her face was obscured by maggots streaming out of her nose, her mouth, her ears, and her eyes. Her t-shirt was hiked up around her shoulders, and around her neck was tightly knotted a bra. This was the body of Sherry Long, and Sherry was a sex worker. So the body is taken and it's examined, and it's determined that she could have been lying in the road for anywhere between 4 and 7 days. So a detective named Fred Miller at the LAPD was given the story to investigate, and he realised that the killer he'd already been hunting had struck again. So who was the killer that he was hunting? He had plenty of suspects, but he couldn't prove anything at this point. So if we go back a few weeks, it's the night of June 19th, 1991. 20-year-old Shannon Exley, who was working secretly as a sex worker, called her father before she went to work, and they chatted. Shannon's lifestyle and her finances, this was stressing her father out beyond belief. He was really concerned about her welfare, as you would be. If your daughter was a prostitute, pretty sure you'd be living on your nerves all the time. You'd constantly be stressed. She'd had some arrests in the past for prostitution, and her dad was very concerned about this. But during this phone call, she said to her dad, I'm going to turn things around. I'm going to change this. I'm going to make different choices in life. Let's speak in the next couple of days when I've figured some stuff out, and I promise I will get out of prostitution and I will make a better living for myself, and I'll be a stronger and better person. Shannon's body was then found hours after this phone call in an empty parking lot. She too had been strangled with her own bra. So, the detective I mentioned earlier, Detective Miller, he puts these together and he determines this is the same killer. We're looking at the same man. So 1 week after this death, a homeless man was foraging for firewood in the industrial zone along the LA River, and he finds a female body. She's lying on her back with a bra tightly knotted around her neck. This was Irene Rodriguez. Now, Irene hadn't long lived, I don't think, in LA. I think she'd not been there for very long. She had come from Mexico, I think, and she was with her husband and her 4 kids. Now, she'd just gone out to do some sex work in a bid to raise money for the family. And now, here she is, dead. So where does the Cecil Hotel sit in this story? Well, Jack Utenwenger, I hope I'm saying that correctly. I think I am. I did German at school, so I'm pretty sure I'm well, I could be totally fucking it up. I'm pretty sure I might be saying it okay. Jack Utenwenger. Jack Utenwenger, yeah, that's it, was staying in the Cecil Hotel at the time that these murders were committed, and they all took place not far from the Cecil Hotel. So was he responsible for these murders? Well, not necessarily, but here's how the story goes. Let's zoom in a little bit on Jack and what his story is. Why is he staying in the Cecil Hotel? Why pick there to stay? Well, we're about to find out. So Jack's story is that he was born in 1950 in Austria. Now, his mother was described as beautiful but wild. What a lovely way to describe someone. I mean, she might have been a crazy. She might have caused him lots of problems in his life, but what a lovely way to describe someone. Beautiful but wild. So his mum was in and out of trouble with the police throughout her whole life. She was jailed while she was pregnant with Jack, but she was released and she travelled to somewhere called Graz. I've never heard of it before. She travelled to Graz, and this is where he was born. He was only maybe 6 or 7, and his mother was arrested in 1953, and she was sent to prison, and he was sent to live with his grandparents. So his mother, her charges were pretty much fraud, petty theft, the odd identity theft, but mainly prostitution. So Jack had a bit of a wild way about him. He was in and out of trouble. He was in and out of prison pretty much throughout all of his youth. Really for sort of petty crimes, but his most serious crime was that he had assaulted a local prostitute. So this is shocking, between 1966 and 1975, he was convicted 16 times, mainly for sexual assault. Ugh, horrible. So he'd spent most of those 9 years, really. Is that 9 years? Let's see. Yeah, he spent most of those 9 years in jail. But he gets out. Now, the going into jail and the coming out of jail, that becomes really important to Jack's story. So let's go to 1974. We are in Austria. Jack's out of prison. He's been in for a theft charge, but he's a free man. He meets 18-year-old German citizen Margaret Schaffer, and they travel to Switzerland together. Now, Margaret was helping Jack out in the attempt to get some money. He was basically completely skint. He'd been in and out of prison. He'd never really built up any kind of income, and Margaret was like, do you know what? I'm going to help you with this. I'm going to work out a way for us to get some money. So they're just sort of boyfriend and girlfriend at this point, and Margaret's like, it's okay, I'm going to get you some money. So they plan to steal from a woman that Margaret knew who lived in Switzerland, who she thinks this is going to be easy to get money from her. But somewhere along the way on the trip, an argument breaks out between Margaret and Jack, and the argument turns so horrifically violent that he beats her to death. And once he's done this, he ties a bra around her neck. It doesn't take long for police to figure out that Jack is the killer in this case. He's arrested and he's sentenced to life in prison. Now we're in 1967. So in 1967, he's sent down for life. So what does Jack do when he gets to prison? He starts to write. He begins to educate himself. He takes advantage of the time that he has on his hands. He starts to read. He starts to get really into literature. During the time that he was in prison, he writes stories, poems, books for children. Creepy. And this is mental. His work starts to get published. People actually start paying attention to Jack Unterwenger's work. They start thinking, there's something in this. Okay. So during his time in prison, this is nuts. He's allowed to give televised readings in the prison auditorium. So you got the prison auditorium, a camera crew come along and they film him giving readings to the other prisoners of his work. It's mad. He had written a play during his time in prison, and the play had been picked up. The play had been published. He was allowed to then attend the premiere of the play in the Vienna People's Theatre. I mean, it's just nuts, isn't it? I just think it's mad. Radio stations had picked up his short stories and they commissioned the reading on air of 50 of his stories, the stories he had written in prison. He published a novel and there was a film deal in progress. This is fucking crazy. This is nuts. This guy, honestly, yeah, it's really strange. But what all of this is doing is it's adding towards one thing for Jack. It's adding towards him being the absolute poster boy for rehabilitation. So suddenly everyone's looking at him and going, he may have done something wrong, but actually look how he's turned it around. So he talks openly in his writings about his sorrow at the death of Margaret and the fact that he was responsible for the death of another human being. So he uses his writings to talk about the crime that he's committed. So, I mean, I'm just going to say here slightly, I'm a bit suspicious of anybody who goes into the prison system and then within a very short time turns around and goes, oh, I'm rehabilitated, that's me, I'm fine. Oh, actually, see all that shit I did before? Yeah, I just forget about it because I'm a totally different person now. I'm just not sure that if you're someone who's violently murdered someone, that's not somewhere within you that the ability is there to do it again. Now, I'm opening up something here which is massive, and actually you could say, yeah, we've all got the ability within us. I could snap tonight and fucking just lose my shit and kill somebody. I won't, and I wouldn't. But then, you know, you can always say, oh, someone's been pushed to a point or whatever. But I just think, or any of us could, any single person could, at any moment, that could happen for them. I understand that. But I'm just not sure with Jack that I really think that he's rehabilitated. I just don't think that's true. So, after 15 years of imprisonment, only 15 years. Now remember, he's in for life at this point. After 15 years, Jack has become such a literary celebrity. Everyone is reading his books, and he's transferred from a maximum security prison, the one that he was in, called Stein. Is that? Yeah, I think that's a German beer. No, that's the glass, isn't it, that you get the German beer in. Anyway, he's taken from Stein and he's put into a minimum security prison. And then this happens. He is released on May the 23rd, 1990. He's released. This is the earliest possible date that he could have been released, and it happened. What's going on here? He was sentenced to life in prison for killing a woman, and he's out in 15 years. You're now a celebrated author. It's very strange. What is happening here? That's a fuck up. That's a big fuck up. So Jack is out, and he's living in Vienna. Vienna. 1 year after his release, guess what the headline of the Vienna Courier newspaper has to say? Prostitute in Vienna murdered. 3 still missing. So these prostitutes, these bodies, what do you think the circumstances of these were? I'll tell you. Each of them found dead at the side of the road. Each of them strangled by a bra strap round their neck. So now police look at him. Obviously, police look at him and they think, well, this is his style, but they don't arrest him. I think this is always one of these things. I run into this a lot whenever I'm looking at stories. I always take a wee second where I go, right, so you've put a man in prison who murdered a prostitute. She lay by the side of the road and she was strangled by a bra strap. And now, the year after you've released the man who did this, 3 more instances have happened, but you're not quite going to arrest him for it. But I also think maybe there's lots and lots of procedures, there's lots and lots of systems within the police that I'm probably not understanding within that. I mean, they can't prove it. They can't actually say that he did these. But come on to fuck, it's so obvious. You know that way you go, it's so clear. But possibly it's so clear because I'm looking at it retrospectively. I'm looking at it with a distance. Maybe if you're a police officer in it at that time, it's just not quite as easy to pin it down. So, since his release from prison, he's doing quite well with his literary career. So he's working for an Austrian magazine, and they say to him, you know what we'd really like you to do? I'd like you to go over to LA because there's been a few prostitutes murdered over there. Like, even if they're like old cases, we'd like you to go over and just write an article about them. What? I think that's crazy. Am I the only one who thinks that's crazy? That's, you. So you're saying to someone who has been in prison for killing someone, go to LA right now. We'll pay for it. We'll send you there to investigate murder. That's weird, isn't it? That's very weird. So, what does he do? He says, yes, okay, that's fine. I'll go. Thank you very much. He goes to LA. And where does he stay when he gets to LA? Yes, you guessed it. The Cecil Hotel. But why? Why does he stay here? This is interesting. He stays because his hero, the person that he looks up to most, is Richard Ramirez. Now, Richard Ramirez is the killer who committed the most hideous, the most violent crimes against women for decades. And Richard Ramirez's style was to kill someone and put a brass strap around their neck. He is the Night Stalker. That's the other title he goes by. Generation Y actually do an amazing couple of episodes on, I think they do it as a two-parter, on Richard Ramirez. You should really give that a listen if you haven't. It's absolutely brilliant. So, Richard Ramirez, during his time, during his killing spree, which had been years and years before, he had stayed in the top floor of the Cecil Hotel. And that's why now Jack has chosen to stay there. That's so fucking creepy. So we're into like weird copycat killings at this point. Because if Richard Ramirez was killing his victims and then wrapping a brass strap around their neck, that's exactly what Jack was doing also. And now he's staying in the same hotel. Oh, it's just really, horrible. So, if we just, I know I keep doing this, but if we just do a big zoom out overview at this moment. Jack Utenwenger has been freed. Now, there are now dead prostitutes in his town in Vienna, and where he's been moved to work in LA, there are also dead prostitutes. They have all died in the same way. So, back in Vienna, the police decide they have enough to arrest him. So, they start to track him down. They discover he's staying at the Cecil Hotel, and they decide they're going to go and they're going to find him. But the heat's on for Jack. He knows it's closing in on him at this point. So with the 3 women dead in LA, he checks out of the hotel and he heads to Miami. But when he's in Miami, he's not there for long. Police catch up with him and he's arrested on suspicion of the deaths in Vienna and the deaths in LA. He's then tried for these murders. He never confesses. He never says, yes, it was me. But the jury feel that there is just so much evidence that they cannot allow him to be a free man. He's sentenced to life in prison. And in his first evening in prison, he doesn't take out a sheet of paper to write something down. Instead, he takes some shoelaces, he takes a cord from his tracksuit trousers, and he hangs himself. And that is the end of Jack Utenwenger. Now that's quite the span of time. I find that really interesting. Also, the fact that he was the poster boy for a system that really fucked up and got it wrong. Who's accountable there? That's what I want to know. Who's accountable? Because yes, you can say he's the one that carried out the killings, but also he was part of a system that let him out of prison for murder after 15 years. Now, I don't care if this guy went into prison, started writing, and he's the next fucking J.K. Rowling. I don't care. There was no need for those women in Vienna and those women in LA to die. The only reason that happened is because a system let him out of prison after 15 years. And I find that really fucking outrageous. I just find it outrageous that these victims lost their life when they never had to, if actually people had just done their fucking job properly. Just do your job properly. Okay, on to resident number 3. So we're in September 1944. Dorothy Jean Purcell is staying in the Cecil Hotel with her husband. She's 19 years old. Now she awakes in the night and she has stomach pains. She doesn't know what these pains are. She's freaked out, but she doesn't wake her husband up. She goes to the bathroom to try and discover what's causing the pains in her stomach. Quickly she realises that she's actually giving birth. What the fuck? That must be... I know you hear stories of this all the time, women who don't know they're pregnant and then suddenly discover they're giving birth. It must just be, the strangest thing in the world. So she takes herself, as I said, into the bathroom. Now she doesn't want to wake her husband because she thinks that he'll be angry. And the reason why would her husband be angry? Well, Dorothy had been fucking somebody else, the shoe salesman. So this had to be the shoe salesman's baby, because her and her husband hadn't shagged in a very long time. So in that bathroom she gives birth to the baby and she thinks the baby is dead. So she heads over to the window and she throws the newborn baby out of the window and into the street. I cannot believe that a human being can be capable of doing that. I just don't understand that. I can't get it. I can't. I just don't understand it. So the baby's tiny body was found later. So she's arrested. She's taken to court. And after hearing lots of testimony, the jury declare that they're not going to sentence her to murder. They're going to find her not guilty by reason of insanity. Oh, horrible. So at the time, the Cecil Hotel, they had so much press around this story. As you can imagine, it's just horrific. It's just absolutely horrible. Resident 4. On October 12, 1962, Pauline Oten, she was 27 years old. Her and her husband are sharing a room in the Cecil Hotel and they have a massive argument. They have a huge screaming couples row. So her husband decides, well, you know what? I've had enough of this argument. I am getting out of here. I'm going to go downstairs or I'm going to go to the next pub. I'm going to do whatever. Just get out of the way. So Pauline thinks at this point, she too has absolutely had enough. She's decided, fuck this. Had enough of this marriage. Had enough of this husband. So she climbs to the window ledge of her room in the Cecil Hotel and she jumps off. She lands, unfortunately, on a 65-year-old man called George Giannani. Both of them are killed instantly. I mean, that's horrible, isn't it? If you've God forbid you would ever take yourself and think, I'm going to throw myself off of this building. But God forbid that you ever killed anybody else in your own suicide. That's just, it's just horrible. So both the bodies of Pauline and George are lying out the front of the Cecil Hotel. So nobody has seen Pauline jump, which is interesting because then what happens is when police arrive, they see these two bodies. They see this 27-year-old Pauline. They see a 65-year-old George, and the immediate assumption is they were having an affair and this is a double suicide. So police start to really investigate the idea that the two of these were having an affair and that they have jumped from this window because they knew the affair couldn't continue, or they wanted to be together forever, or whatever. But anyway, they're obviously heading way down the wrong road with that. So after a while, a detective looks closer at the case and he says, well, actually, George has still got his hands in his pockets and he's still wearing his shoes. And it's very, very unlikely that if he had fallen 90 feet, then this would be the case. So they discover that actually this was just Pauline's suicide and that this was just an absolutely unfortunate place for George to be at that time. So yet again, another time when the Cecil Hotel is thrown into massive publicity for the strange things that are happening in its hotel. Okay, our final resident and the most famous resident of the Cecil Hotel, Eliza Lam. Okay, it's well known, Eliza Lam, but fuck, it is interesting. This is the subject of, I think, the most bizarre and disturbing case that's ever going to have taken place. Well, pretty much anywhere, but also just in that hotel. Who was Eliza Lam? She was a Canadian student and she was in Los Angeles because she had embarked upon a solo tour. She was out on her own. She had decided that she wanted to just tour some American cities and specifically in the west coast of America. I would love to do that. Do you know that? That's one of my things. I would just love to do that. There's so many cities in America I would love to see. I've only ever been to Florida in America and it worries me. That sounds really daft, but it really worries me sometimes that I won't ever get the chance to see these cities. I'm saying worries me like I'm 95 years old. I'm not 95 years old, but I just don't know when on the horizon the chance to see LA or see other cities will arise. Who knows? Anyway, I'm sorry I've wandered off and started talking about myself when I should be talking about the most important person in this story. Eliza had checked in to the Cecil Hotel on the 31st of January. She had started her tour in San Diego, and after a few days in other places, this is where she arrived. So she went out sightseeing. She did a few different things in her time in LA. Her journey was scheduled to continue to Santa Cruz. So Eliza had the whole journey worked out. It wasn't chance that she got to the Cecil Hotel. Getting to the Cecil Hotel was always a part of her plan. Well, maybe not that particular hotel, but getting to LA was in her plans. So she's very, very, very close to her parents and she speaks to them every day on the phone. Now, that's a healthy thing to have a good, healthy relationship with your parents. But there is another reason, and that is Elisa Lam was bipolar, and her parents were very anxious about her taking this trip on her own. Very anxious because she could sometimes have the most manic of highs and sometimes the most depressive of lows. And it worried her family that she would be on her own, travelling around, exposed, vulnerable. But, as I'm sure they probably went through in all the discussions, simply because your child's bipolar, it doesn't mean that you can then say you can't ever go anywhere. You can't ever experience anything. And she was very able, Elisa. She was smart. She was a bright girl. She knew what she was about. So there comes a day and she's not in contact with her parents. Now, she'd been phoning them every day and they couldn't quite understand why had the call not come on that day. So they, finding this very odd, they contact the LA police and they report her disappearance. So hotel staff said that she was alone on the morning of her disappearance, and the manager of a nearby bookstore, now he was the last person to see her alive, he described her as outgoing, very lively and very friendly. She'd come in to buy gifts for her family. So police then proceed to search the hotel. They use scent tracking dogs, but they're not coming up with anything. They can't find anything at this point. Because they can't find her, they can't really say that a crime has been committed. So she's not there. Where's she gone? So the LAPD post flyers all around the neighbourhood. All around that area, they urge anyone with any information to come forward. So a week passes. Her family, they fly out to LA, and her disappearance to them is just so baffling. They cannot get their head around what might have happened here. So the case is about to take its very first sharp turn towards the truly bizarre. It's very bizarre and it's very unsettling. Now, I'm just going to warn you, if you haven't seen what I'm about to describe, watch it with caution because it is unforgettable. It's actually burned into my brain. Something about it really stays with me and it's freaky. On February the 16th, the LAPD released surveillance video from the hotel that had been taken on the 1st of February, around about the time when Elisa had disappeared. This really unsettling video appears and it shows her in the hotel elevator and she's behaving in the most bizarre manner. It shows her so at one point she's peeking out of the elevator and then at the next moment she's hiding in the corner. Then she's pressing multiple buttons on it. Then she's getting out and she's doing these weird erratic gestures. What the hell they are, I haven't a clue. And then she's sort of doing this weird dance in the hallway. And she gets back into the elevator and it looks like she's trying to move between all the different floors. On the face of it, it sort of looks like she's running away from someone. Then it suddenly turns into me. It looks a bit like it's a game she's playing with someone. It looks like a sort of game of, I'm on this floor, where do you think I am? Then there's moments in it, and these are the most horrible ones. She starts to look scared at points. And then you start thinking, this is no longer a game. It is the weirdest video to watch because you just don't really know what to make of it. So the video gets released to the press and it gathers massive media attention. The publicity around the case really goes through the roof, the fucking roof at this point, because this video is just So strange. So the theories begin to spread. They begin to get out there. People are saying she's on drugs. Clearly, she is on drugs. Others who knew at this point that she was on bipolar medication are saying something's gone wrong with her medication, and that's what's making her act like this in the elevator. Other people say she was being stalked by somebody in the hotel and she was running away. Others say she'd met someone in the hotel and she was just playing a game with them. So these are all just theories, because there is no, she's missing, but there's no body. There's nothing to actually back this up. She's missing, and here we have this weird video evidence. It was around about this time that hotel guests began to complain that there was a strange taste to the water. The water was discoloured. It was coming through the taps and the shower, and it was starting to look black, as they described it. Like black water was coming out of the taps. There was incredibly low water pressure throughout some of the rooms in the hotel. So employees then, they think, well, we'll get someone in to look at the plumbing. So the plumbers arrive, they're looking around, and they think, let's go up to the water tanks. And what they discover in there is absolutely horrible. Inside one of the tanks, floating naked next to her clothes and her belongings, was the partially decomposed body of Eliza Lam. Now, the discovery of the body, it only brought up more questions than it could actually answer. The autopsy on her body found no evidence of trauma or sexual assault. There were no traces of drugs, and there was no evidence that Eliza had attempted this as a suicide attempt. There was just no evidence that that's what it was. So eventually they said it's an accidental drowning. So the theory there is, this is weird. The theory is that she climbed in herself. So the tanks, the water tanks, it seems they're not easy to access. They're not easy to open. They're big, massive, heavy metal lids, and she would have had to have moved them aside, got herself in, and then replaced the lid. Access up to the area of the water tanks was alarmed. So that immediately says, well, there's a slight problem there, because how did she get up there without setting an alarm off? So many fucking questions here. Now, the video of her in the elevator, that remains the real source of confusion, and the thing which people really hoped at the time this would give answers. But the slight twist is, it's discovered that the video had actually been edited before it had been allowed for public release. So there is a minute and a half in the video of her in the elevator that's missing. Where is that minute and a half? I want to see that. I feel like I need to see what was happening in that minute and a half that we're not allowed to see. So, were answers ever found in the case of Eliza Lam? Frustratingly, no. So much gets made of that video. So many theories of how she may have ended up in the water tank. There's lots. If you search Eliza Lam theories online, you are going to be there for hours seeing what people have got to say. A lot gets made of the fact that her Tumblr account still gets updated every now and then. And some people will say, well, that's just automatic things that, any of your social media websites will do. They'll just automatically update something. But Elisa Lam's phone was never found. And so there is a theory that someone has her phone and is using that to update her Tumblr. That's just a theory. Sometimes I think these things are things that people would just like to make a story a bit weirder sometimes. Also, there is a Chinese man who made a video, and you can find this on YouTube. It's all in Mandarin, but you get the gist of it. He goes to the Cecil Hotel and he walks around it with his camera. He shows you what it looks like, and he goes to the elevator that this footage came from. Because what he's looking for there is he's looking to see what could she see when she jumped outside of it. What was her view at that point? Could she see someone around the corner? Could she see someone at the end of the corridor? What could she actually see? He then goes up through the door that was alarmed, but he's able to get through it in the video. That's the strange thing, because the hotel staff don't know that he's filming this, and he's able to get through the door. So that kind of then discredits the whole idea of, well, actually, an alarm would have gone off, because if this random Chinese man who just brought his own camera was able to get through it, then perhaps the door wasn't actually alarmed. So he goes through the door. He then goes up to the water tanks, and in this video you sort of get an idea of the scale of them, and you see them and you go, wow, they are big. They are really fucking big. So getting up there for her, getting up there for anyone would have been difficult. Getting up there for her, she would have had to have had some climbing skills to get there. But then also, the thing that it does for me is, when I watch that video, is it just causes me more problems, because then I was like, well, actually, if someone carrying her body up there, that would have been even more problematic. It would have been even more difficult. So the video is creepy. I wouldn't recommend watching it unless you were so inclined. Anyway, if you want to go and you want to look up all the Elisa Lam conspiracy theories, there are so many out there, you can. But sadly, that ends the story of Elisa Lam. And that ends the story of the Cecil Hotel. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed that. And do you know, one question I'm left with at the end of this is, I was thinking to myself, would that stay there? Because it's still there. It's the now, what is it, stay on main. I think I would. I think with my fascination with creepy things, I think I would actually stay. Don't get me wrong, I would be shitting myself when it got dark. But I still think I'd stay. Would you? Would you stay? I don't know. Okay, so if you want to get in touch, you can. On Twitter, it's at Extra Stories Pod. On Instagram and Facebook, Extraordinary Stories Podcast. Also, it would be lovely to see you there on the Facebook group, Extraordinary Stories Podcast. As always, I've got Patreon, so if you wanted to donate any money to the podcast, I would be really happy if you did that. It can be £1, it can be $1, it can be a one-off £3 donation if you want. The details are on my Facebook page. Email me, as always, any thoughts you've ever got. Get in contact. Get in contact with me through the Facebook group, through my email, through Twitter. I love to speak to people. I love it. So, if you've got anything to say, any thoughts, any theories, any suggestions, get in touch. As always, thank you for listening. Okay, goodbye.
It didn't affect me really one way or the other. would imagine from the look on his face. Let's get it on. Let's do it. Let's get it over.